After what feels like an eternity of speculation and rumour, Audi has finally confirmed its first ever Formula 1 entry and will join the grid in 2026. The German manufacturer has beaten its Volkswagen Group sister brand Porsche to an official announcement and revealed a new F1 engine programme, with news that it will also take over the Sauber team expected by the end of 2022. It brings an end to one of F1's longest running will they won't they stories, as Audi's been linked to an F1 project for many years. But in all the excitement of this finally becoming reality and the first concrete details of the new project, Audi also seems to have made its first mistake. Big manufacturer projects can't help themselves when it comes to setting out timelines to achieve major goals. Audi will be the first new engine manufacturer on the grid since Honda joined in 2015, and the first major works team takeover since Renault bought Lotus ahead of the 2016 season, although Renault at least had an established F1 engine operation. Both Honda and Renault publicly set aggressive targets and failed to achieve them. Honda's difficult return to F1 in the turbo hybrid era is a tale of caution from an engine perspective. Although Audi is entering under modified and simplified rules and has a longer lead time than the Honda programme that was fast-tracked for 2015, it is still on the back foot compared to much more experienced opposition. After a miserable start with poor performance and woeful reliability, it took Honda until its 5th season to even score a victory. And the expense of that project was so great when balanced against the drive to electrify within the automotive industry that Honda withdrew from F1 as an official participant last year, although at least did so while winning the Drivers' Championship with Red Bull and Max Verstappen. But it's not just on the engine side that Audi can find a reminder of the harsh reality of competing in F1. It intends to enter as a team and is expected to take over the Sauber operation, a midfield team with good facilities but one that requires further investment. Audi need only look to Renault to see a shining example of the fact that taking over an existing team is a simpler process than starting a brand new one, but can still be an arduous task if that team requires significant investment. Renault's works team, now branded Alpine, scored the first victory of its comeback in last year's Hungarian Grand Prix, but has been stuck in F1's midfield for the entirety of this era. This is largely a legacy of Team Enstone falling to its knees when Lotus suffered a financial crisis. Even a more obvious success story like Mercedes contains a note of caution for Audi. Mercedes re-entered F1 as a team in 2010, taking over the title-winning Brawn operation and benefiting from a long-established and successful engine operation, but it still took 41 races to score a victory and 5 seasons to win a championship. And despite the pattern of big manufacturers being burned by setting public timelines, Audi has declared an expectation to succeed quickly. Audi CEO Markus Duesmann has admitted that Audi has a lot of pressure in order to be ready for 2026 and will take time to get its infrastructure up to the required standard. But he still expects it to be very competitive within 3 years of its F1 debut. Obviously, this is not impossible. Audi has a great track record in motorsport and has been ultra successful in other disciplines, notably sports car racing and its signature event, the Le Mans 24 Hours. For a manufacturer like Audi, very competitive can only mean at least fighting for podiums. That's a bold target within 3 years of entering F1, whether that's from an engine or team perspective. Sauber, the team Audi is likely to take over, is currently a sporadic points finisher, and only Red Bull, Ferrari and Mercedes can consider themselves regular podium contenders over the past 5 years or so. It might sound like Audi's set a vague target, but it's a public one with a short timeline and will be hard to achieve, even for a manufacturer like Audi, though it will likely have gone down well in the boardroom given the convention among corporations for 3-year plans. So why might Audi be so confident, and how will the project work? Audi has been tempted into F1 at this time partly because of the new engine regulations, which are simplified compared to the current rules, despite having an increased electrical emphasis. But the other appeal is F1's massive growth and cost-cutting measures, making it a sustainable, long-term investment. Teams already adhere to a budget cap, something that will be implemented for engine manufacturers from 2023 too, which means manufacturers can plan F1 programs with a relatively clear project spend for the first time. The expectation is that the investment in Audi's facility, the 4-year lead time for developing the power unit before its racing debut in 2026, the cost cap, and some concessions such as extra dyno hours and capital expenditure for new entrants, will mean Audi does not begin racing in F1 at a disadvantage to the existing engine suppliers. Audi's F1 engine project will be based at its Competence Centre Motorsport in the Bavarian town of Neuburg. The 47-hectare site in Germany opened in 2014 as the new home of Audi Sport. The facility already has the required test benches for F1 power unit testing, both for the V6 internal combustion engine and the electric motor and batteries. This allowed work on Audi's 2026 F1 engine project to start in March of this year. It is currently making what are described as additional necessary preparations for personnel, buildings and technical infrastructure in order to bring its facility up to F1 standards. All of this is expected to be fully up and running at the end of 2022. Audi declined to comment on the scale of the resource at its F1 facility, but more than 100 staff are already said to be working on the F1 project, and this is expected to rise to around 300 once the recruitment process is complete. A separate company has been set up to run the F1 power unit programme, although it is a fully owned subsidiary of Audi Sport. Adam Baker has been appointed CEO of the Audi F1 project, having previously worked as the FIA's safety director from mid-2018 before joining Audi in 2021. Prior to that, Baker spent 13 years with BMW. The majority of those were with BMW Motorsport, but included a 12-month stint as head of powertrain department for its World Superbike team. He was also involved in the BMW Sauber F1 project that competed from 2006 until 2009, and he also worked as an F1 engine engineer for Cosworth. As we've mentioned, Audi is not the only VW Group brand set to enter F1 in 2026. Porsche has been linked with Red Bull and potentially buying 50% of the Red Bull technology company that builds the cars for Red Bull Racing and parts for AlphaTauri. When interest from Porsche and Audi was first known, the assumption was that the VW Group brands would pool their resources to make any F1 programme as cost effective as possible. But earlier this year it emerged that they would be independent projects, which seems strange from an F1 perspective, even though Porsche and Audi do have a history of competing against one another, most recently at the Le Mans 24 Hours and in Formula E. Audi and Porsche had a huge discussion about combining resources for their new F1 projects before deciding to keep them completely separate. The logistics of an Audi team building its own car and Porsche partnering with Red Bull has been flagged as a serious point of consideration. We've already mentioned that Audi's engine will be built in Germany, and assuming the manufacturer buys Sauber, its car would be designed and manufactured in Switzerland. Porsche, however, will work with the newly created Red Bull Powertrains facility that has been added to the Red Bull campus in Milton Keynes, so we'll share a site with that organisation's race team. The suggestion is that a shared engine would have presented too many complications with Audi and Porsche using different chassis designs. So the conclusion was that separate engines would be required as well, and Audi was willing to make that commitment. It says that the project should not cost more than it was spending on prior motorsport series either. To meet that commitment, Audi has axed its LMDH programme, which was in the development phase, sacrificing a Le Mans return to focus on F1, though it will continue to compete in the Dakar Rally and provide GT cars for customer racing. Another factor that shouldn't be underestimated in keeping Audi and Porsche separate is that it gives the VW Group two big bites at the F1 cherry. Audi and the VW Group as a whole have made no secret of the fact that F1's boom in the US and increasing a young audience have been a massive part of the appeal. CEO Juiceman even said that both brands have a lot of fans and both our brands have their special character, so we decided to keep it completely separate and do two operations. To make the most of this, Audi insists it is joining F1 for the long term. This will give it the best chance of getting a strong return on a sizable investment, but there is clearly an appetite for rapid success too. Audi's F1 project is entirely its own, and that brings with it big expectations.